My name is Ingrid. I'm 33 years old. And last month, I was the only one sitting beside my father's hospital bed when he died. Not my mother. Not my sister. Just me. 3 days later, we sat in a lawyer's office for the will reading. The room was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear papers shift and people breathe. The lawyer cleared his throat and began listing assets, accounts, property, investments. Then he said my sister's name. Millions. He said my mother's name. Everything else. And then he looked at me. I was left $1. I remember thinking it had to be a mistake. Not because I expected anything, but because of what my father had said to me the night he died. Right before the machines went silent, he grabbed my wrist. His voice was weak, confused, and he said, "Check the desk." At the time I didn't understand what he meant, but sitting there holding that will, being erased in front of everyone, I knew it wasn't an accident, because my father had always kept one desk, locked, untouched. After the lawyer finished, my mother didn't look at me. My sister smiled, just slightly, like this outcome had been inevitable. I said nothing. I stood up. I walked out, and I drove straight back to the house. Before I tell you what I found inside that desk, the letter that explained everything, and the document that would later make my mother collapse, I want to pause for just a moment. If you find this story worth hearing, you can like or subscribe, but only if you genuinely want to see how it ends. And if you're watching right now, leave a comment telling me where you're from and what time it is there. I read more of those than you think. Now, to understand why my father left me $1, you need to go back to the night he was admitted to the hospital, because that was the first time I realized I had already been written out of this family. Back to the hospital admission night. The night my father was admitted to the hospital started with a phone call I almost didn't answer. It was my mother. Her voice was tight, controlled. She said, "Your father collapsed. They're taking him in." I asked where my sister was. There was a pause. Then she said, "She's busy. She'll come later." I drove myself to the hospital. 2 hours on an empty highway, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt. When I arrived, the ICU doors were already closed. My father was unconscious. Machines surrounded him. Monitors flashing, tubes everywhere. The steady mechanical sound of breathing that didn't belong to him. I took the chair beside his bed. My mother arrived an hour later. She didn't hug me. She didn't ask how I was. She asked the nurse about paperwork. My sister never came that night. Or the next. Over the next 3 days I barely left that chair. I slept in it. I ate from vending machines. I learned the rhythm of the monitors by heart. My mother came and went. Always on her phone. Always stepping outside to take calls. Whenever I asked if my sister was coming, she said the same thing. She has a lot going on right now. On the second night, my father stirred. The nurse checked his vitals and said he was lucid, just briefly. I leaned forward. I said his name. His eyes opened halfway. He looked straight at me, and then past me, and he whispered my sister's name. I corrected him. Gently. "It's me. Ingrid." He frowned like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't have time for. Then he said something else. Something that didn't belong to that moment. He said, "She doesn't know about the desk." The nurse asked him to rest. My mother stepped in and told me not to upset him. But before he closed his eyes again, he reached out and caught my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. And he said it again, slower this time. Clearer. "The desk. Don't forget the desk." That was the last full sentence my father ever spoke. An hour later, his condition worsened. By morning, the doctors said there was nothing more they could do. When he died, I was still sitting there. My mother arrived 20 minutes later. My sister sent a text. "I'm so sorry. I'll call later." She never did. Standing there, watching nurses disconnect machines, I felt something settle in my chest. Not grief. Not yet. Recognition. Because this wasn't new. This was just the first time it was undeniable. And as we prepared for the funeral, with my mother taking charge, and my sister suddenly very involved again, I couldn't stop thinking about those words. The desk. Whatever my father had meant, he had wanted me to and do it before they did. And at the funeral, I realized exactly where I stood in this family publicly. My father's funeral was held 4 days later. It was large. Larger than I expected. People filled the chapel. Co-workers, distant relatives, neighbors I barely recognized. Conversations hummed softly, polite and rehearsed, like everyone knew exactly how they were supposed to behave. Except me. I arrived early alone. I chose a seat near the aisle a few rows back. Not the front. Not hidden either. Somewhere neutral. When my mother arrived, she didn't look for me. She walked straight to the front row. My sister followed behind her, dressed impeccably. Black dress, tailored coat, hair perfect. She slipped into the seat beside our mother, and people immediately leaned in to greet her. I watched hands reach for her arms. I heard murmured condolences meant specifically for her. You must be devastated. He was so proud of you. No one said those things to me. When the service began, the officiant spoke about family unity, about legacy, about devotion. Then he invited my sister to stand. She gave a short speech, polished, emotional, carefully controlled. She talked about how close she and our father were, how much he supported her, how much she would miss him. The room responded exactly how she expected. Soft crying, nods of approval. A few people glanced back toward my row briefly, like they were checking to see if I was reacting appropriately. I stayed still. After the service, people gathered in clusters. My sister was surrounded within seconds. My mother stood beside her, hand resting on her back, introducing her to people as if she were hosting an event. "This is my daughter," she said proudly. She never once gestured in my direction. I moved toward the side of the room near the exit where the noise was quieter. That's when my aunt approached me, my father's older sister. She didn't hug me right away. She studied my face first. "You stayed with him," she said. I nodded. She lowered her voice. "Your mother didn't." I didn't respond. She slipped something into my hand. A small card folded in half. "Read this later," she said. "Not here." Before I could ask what it was, my mother called her name sharply from across the room. My aunt stepped back, her expression changing instantly. As she turned to leave, she said one last thing. Quietly, firmly. "Don't trust them." I stood there for a moment, the card still warm in my palm. Across the room, my sister laughed softly at something someone said. My mother smiled beside her, composed and steady, like this was exactly how the day was meant to go. That's when I understood something important. This funeral wasn't about my father. It was about maintaining order. About making sure everyone saw the family the way my mother wanted them to be seen. Intact, respectable, unquestioned. And in that picture I didn't have a role. I left before the reception ended. Outside, sitting alone in my car, I finally opened the card my aunt had given me. It had only 5 words written in neat handwriting. He hid it on purpose. No explanation. No name. Just that. And suddenly my father's last words echoed back to me. The desk. 2 weeks later at the lawyer's office, I finally learned what he'd been trying to protect, and who had taken it. 2 weeks later, we sat in a law office that smelled like old paper, and coffee that had been reheated too many times. My mother chose the seat in the center of the table, directly across from the lawyer. My sister sat to her right. I took the chair farthest from both of them. The lawyer cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. He spoke carefully, formally, like someone who already knew this wouldn't end well. He began with the basics. Property. Accounts. Personal items. My sister listened politely, hands folded in her lap. My mother stared straight ahead, expression neutral, composed. Then the numbers started. The house. The savings. The investments. Each item went to my sister. There was no hesitation. No explanation. Just confirmation after confirmation, read aloud in an even voice. I waited. I didn't interrupt. I didn't react. When the lawyer finally reached my name, he paused. "Ingrid," he said, glancing down at the page, "you have been left $1. The room went quiet. Not shocked quiet, uncomfortable quiet. The kind where everyone knows they're supposed to look sympathetic, but no one wants to be the first to move. My sister's mouth tightened for half a second. Then she looked down as if embarrassed for me. My mother didn't turn her head. The lawyer slid a single piece of paper toward me across the table. $1. Picked it up. The paper felt thinner than it should have. Lighter. Almost insulting in its fragility. This is correct, the lawyer continued. Your father specified that this amount was intentional. Intentional. That word stayed with me. Because I remembered the card my aunt had given me. And I remembered my father's voice in the hospital. The desk. When the meeting ended, people stood too quickly. Chairs scraped. My sister hugged the lawyer. My mother thanked him. Neither of them looked at me. In the hallway, my mother finally spoke. You understand, she said, not phrased as a question. Your sister needed stability. You're independent. Independent. That was the word she always used when she wanted to justify leaving me out. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I nodded once and walked past them toward the exit. Outside, the air felt sharper than before. I sat in my car and didn't start it right away. Because something wasn't adding up. My father had been meticulous. Careful. Quietly intentional. He never did anything without reason, especially when it came to money. And the man who held my hand in the ICU, who whispered about something hidden, would not have erased me without explanation. Not like that. I drove back to the house I had grown up in, the one my mother still lived in. She was surprised to see me. I just need a few things, I said calmly. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Inside, everything looked the same. Too clean. Too controlled. As if nothing had ever gone wrong there. I moved toward my father's study. My mother followed me halfway down the hall. There's nothing in there for you, she said. That was when I felt it, the pressure. The urgency. The desk sat exactly where it always had. Heavy. Dark wood. Locked drawer. I remembered my father's hand squeezing mine. The desk. I turned back toward my mother. Why? I asked. She exhaled sharply, already irritated. You're imagining things, she said. Your father made his choices. Then she added quickly, don't do this. Don't embarrass yourself. That's when I knew. Whatever had happened, whatever had been taken, wasn't an accident. And it wasn't small. Because if it were, she wouldn't be afraid of me opening a drawer. I waited until she left the room. Then I knelt in front of the desk. What I found inside that drawer would change everything, and prove that the dollar wasn't a mistake. I stayed kneeling in front of the desk for a long moment before I touched it. Not because I was scared, but because once I opened it, there would be no going back. Whatever was inside would either explain everything, or prove that I'd imagined my father's last words. The drawer was locked. Of course it was. My mother had always been careful. Not emotional. Careful. I stood up and checked the bookshelf behind the desk, running my fingers along the spines the way my father used to when he was thinking. Nothing moved. Nothing clicked. Then I remembered something small. When I was a kid, my father used to keep a spare key taped inside the old desk lamp. Not hidden, just overlooked. I lifted it. The key was still there. My hand didn't shake when I slid it into the lock. The drawer opened smoothly, quietly, like it had been waiting. Inside were 3 things. A sealed envelope, a stack of journals, and a thin manila folder labeled with my name, Ingrid. I sat back on my heels staring at it. I didn't open anything right away. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. My mother appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes sharp. What are you doing? She asked. I didn't answer. She stepped closer, saw the open drawer, and her face changed, not to anger, not to shock, but to something tighter. Controlled. That's private, she said. You shouldn't be digging through things that don't belong to you. I looked up at her. Then why is my name on it? She hesitated. Just long enough. That doesn't mean anything, she said. Your father was confused at the end. You know that. Confused. That was the word she always used when she wanted to erase someone else's voice. I reached for the envelope. Her tone sharpened. Ingrid. Stop. I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, handwritten, careful, deliberate. My father's handwriting. He hadn't been confused. He had been preparing. My mother stepped forward. You're misunderstanding. I'm not, I said calmly. She stopped talking, because she could see it in my face. Whatever was in that letter, it wasn't vague. And it wasn't kind to her version of events. I stood up, holding the envelope and the folder against my chest. "We'll talk later," she said quickly. "This isn't the right time." "It's the only time," I replied. Her voice softened just slightly. "You don't want to do this. It'll only hurt you." That was the first honest thing she'd said all day. Because she was right, it would hurt. But not the way she meant. I walked past her without another word. In my car, I sat for nearly 20 minutes before I opened anything else. The journals came first. They weren't daily entries. They were notes, dates, observations, conversations recorded carefully over years. And woven through all of them was the same pattern. My father trying to protect something. My mother trying to redirect it. My sister benefiting quietly. Then I opened the folder. Inside were copies of documents I had never seen before. Wills, drafts, changes. And one page, folded, worn, with my father's signature and a note in the margin. "If anything happens to me, check the earlier version." Earlier version. My chest tightened. As now I understood. The dollar wasn't the plan. It was the cover. And the desk wasn't sentimental. It was evidence. I started the engine and drove away, knowing I couldn't stay there another minute, knowing that if I did, they would find a way to take this too. But before I could act, I needed to know one thing. Whether what I'd found was enough to prove the truth. I didn't go home after leaving my parents' house. Instead, I drove straight to my Aunt Helen's place, my father's older sister. We hadn't been close, not because of distance, but because my mother had always described her as dramatic and unnecessary. Now I wondered how many people had been quietly removed from my life for convenience. Helen opened the door and froze when she saw me. "Oh," she said softly. "You finally found it." That sentence alone told me everything. She made tea we barely touched. I laid the envelope, the journals, and the folder out on her dining table, one by one like fragile evidence. Helen didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp. She just nodded slowly, as if she were watching something inevitable finally arrive. "He tried to tell you," she said. "Didn't he?" "Yes," I replied. "But too late." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a folded card, old, yellowed at the edges. I recognized it instantly. It was the same handwriting as the note I'd found. "Your father gave me this years ago," she explained. "He said if anything ever happened, and if you came to me with questions, I was supposed to give you this." Inside was a name, a phone number, and one line written in careful block letters. "Use the earlier will." The lawyer's office was quiet in the way places get when they deal with bad news for a living. The man who met us had been practicing longer than I'd been alive. He read everything without expression. The journals, the drafts, the margin notes, flipping pages slowly, deliberately. Finally, he leaned back. "This," he said, tapping the folder, "is not what was executed." My breath caught. "There are at least 2 prior versions of your father's will," he continued. "In both, you are listed as a primary beneficiary. The dollar allocation appears only in the final document." "Is that legal?" I asked. "It depends," he replied, "on how it got there." He pointed to a signature. "The handwriting pressure here doesn't match your father's baseline. Not enough tremor. Not enough decline. Which means either it was signed earlier than reported, or someone guided it." Guided it. The room felt smaller. "So you're saying," I started. "I'm saying," he interrupted calmly, "that this will raise serious concerns of undue influence or forgery." Helen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "What happens now?" I asked. The lawyer folded his hands. "Now you decide how far you want to take this. Because if you proceed, it won't stay private." I nodded. I already knew that. When I left his office, my phone buzzed. My sister. I let it ring. Then my mother. I declined the call. A text followed almost immediately. "We need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. That word again, the favorite tool of people who never plan to explain themselves. Then another message, this time from my sister. "Why are you doing this? You're going to tear the family apart." I stared at the screen, because that's when it finally clicked. They weren't afraid of losing me. They were afraid of losing control of the story. I typed one message back. "I'm not doing anything. I'm just reading what was written." Then I turned my phone off. That night, sitting alone, I reread my father's journals, not as evidence, but as a record of love I hadn't known how to see before. He had tried. Quietly. Carefully. And now for the first time I could too. What I didn't realize yet was that my sister had already started preparing her own defense. My sister called again the next morning. This time I answered. Ingrid, Monica said, her voice already tight. Why are lawyers involved? I didn't call them, I replied evenly. I read what Dad left behind. There was a pause. Then a sigh, practice controlled. You're taking this way too far, she said. You always do that. You overthink, and suddenly it's a conspiracy. I leaned back against the kitchen counter, watching sunlight move across the floor. Felt strange how calm I was. It's not a theory, I said. It's documentation. She laughed. A short, sharp sound. So what, you think Mom forged a will? That Dad didn't know what he was signing. I think, I replied, that the paperwork doesn't match the timeline. Another pause. Longer this time. You know, she said slowly, Dad wasn't himself near the end. He was confused. Emotional. People say things they don't mean. He wrote for years, I said. That's not confusion. Her tone shifted then, softer, wounded. I needed that money, she said. You know that. I had responsibilities. A mortgage. A family. And I had nothing, I replied. By design. That was when she snapped. You always want to be the victim, she said. You're doing this because you're bitter. No, I said quietly. I'm doing this because the truth exists. She hung up. By noon my mother called. She asked to meet, just the two of us, to clear the air. We met at a cafe near her house, the same one she'd taken Monica to after every milestone. I noticed she didn't order anything. She didn't sit comfortably. Ingrid, she began, folding her hands. I wish you had come to us first. I did, I said. Years ago. You told me not to be selfish. Her jaw tightened. You don't understand how complicated things were, she said. Your father was sick. Decisions had to be made quickly. So you decided for him? Her eyes flicked away. We did what was best for the family, she said. For Monica, I corrected. She looked at me then, really looked, and for a moment I thought she might tell the truth. Instead she said, if you push this, people will talk. They'll judge us. Is that what you want? That was the threat. Not denial. Not explanation. Exposure. I'm not pushing anything, I said calmly. I'm responding. She reached across the table. You could still stop this. I could, I agreed. But I won't. That night the messages started. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years reached out with concern. Vague questions wrapped in politeness. An aunt posted something online about family loyalty. Someone sent me a screenshot of a private group chat I wasn't in. They were preparing the narrative. I wasn't surprised. What surprised me was how little it hurt. Because for the first time I wasn't asking them to choose me. I was choosing myself. The lawyer emailed the next morning. Formal notice sent. Evidence preserved. Do not engage directly. I forwarded it to my mother and sister. Then I waited. What I didn't know yet was that my sister had already made one critical mistake, and it was about to surface. 2 days later my Aunt Helen called. She never called me directly. Not once in my adult life. I heard things are tense, she said carefully. I think we should talk. We met at her house that afternoon. It was quiet, neat, untouched by the chaos that had swallowed mine. She poured tea she barely drank and sat across from me like she'd rehearsed this moment. I didn't want to get involved, she began. But after your father passed, I couldn't ignore certain things anymore. I didn't interrupt. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin folder. Old. Yellowed at the edges. This was your father's, she said. He gave it to me years ago. Told me to keep it safe in case something happened. Inside were copies. Bank statements. Drafts of a will. Notes in my father's handwriting. The same careful slant I'd seen in his journals. He was worried, she said quietly. About your mother. About Monica. My chest tightened but my voice stayed level. Worried how? He believed they were planning to change things after his health declined, she said. He said if that happened, You'd be blamed for asking questions. That part didn't surprise me. What did the lawyer say? I asked. She slid a card across the table. The same firm listed on the forged will. I already spoke to him, she said. Unofficially. I made the appointment the next morning. The law office smelled like paper and disinfectant. Neutral. Professional. Safe. The lawyer didn't waste time. The will filed after your father's death raises concerns, he said. Formatting inconsistencies, signature irregularities, and most importantly, conflicting documents dated earlier. He placed two signatures side by side. One was steady, familiar. The other tried too hard. Forgery? I asked. Strongly suspected, he replied. Enough to warrant a full review. He explained the process calmly. The timeline. The risks. Your sister may have participated. Your mother may have directed it. If proven, criminal charges are possible. I nodded, absorbing each word. What happens next? I asked. We move carefully, he said. Evidence must be protected. And you should expect resistance. I almost smiled. I'm used to that. When I left, my phone buzzed. A message from Monica. Why are you talking to Aunt Helen? I didn't reply. Another message followed. She doesn't know the whole story. Neither do you. Still I stayed silent. Because for the first time the truth wasn't just mine. It had witnesses. That evening my mother called again. Her voice was different now. Tighter. Sharper around the edges. Why are you digging up old things? She asked. You're tearing this family apart. I didn't tear anything, I said. I uncovered it. She exhaled hard. You think a lawyer makes you powerful? No, I replied. Facts do. She hung up. I sat alone in my apartment, rereading the copies Aunt Helen had given me. Dates. Numbers. Margins filled with my father's careful notes. This wasn't emotion. It was a record. And records don't lie. But before we could move forward, my sister made one last attempt to stop me. And this time she crossed a line she couldn't take back. My sister called the next morning. I watched the phone vibrate on the table for a full 3 seconds before answering. Ingrid, Monica said, already irritated. Why are you doing this? I'm not doing anything, I replied. I'm responding. To what? She snapped. Dad's gone. Mom is barely holding it together. And now you're dragging lawyers into it. Her voice was calm, but I recognized the tactic. Reasonable tone. Moral pressure. You benefited from something that wasn't yours, I said. I'm allowed to ask why. There was a pause. Just long enough to be deliberate. You always do this, she said. You make things uncomfortable. You twist stories until people feel sorry for you. I let the silence stretch. That's not an answer, I said. Her tone shifted. You think Aunt Helen cares about you? She asked. She's bitter. She always hated Mom. That still doesn't explain the signatures, I replied. Another pause. This one wasn't controlled. You're going to regret this, she said quietly. The call ended. By noon, my mother sent a message asking to meet. Just us. No lawyers. I agreed, but I recorded everything. We met at a cafe near her house. Neutral territory. Public enough to keep her composed. She arrived early. Perfect posture. Soft smile. The same face she wore when she wanted something. Ingrid, she said, touching my hand. I don't understand why you're hurting us. I'm not, I replied. I'm asking for the truth. She sighed. Your father was confused at the end. You know that. The journals say otherwise. Her jaw tightened for half a second before smoothing out. Those were personal thoughts, she said. Not legal documents. Then why change the will? I asked. She leaned closer. Because families make adjustments. Because Monica needed stability. Because you were independent. There it was. So you took my inheritance, I said calmly, and called it balance. Her eyes flashed. You weren't supposed to find out. She straightened. If you go public with this, people will talk. About you. About your mental state. About why you were never close to your father. That was the line. I'm not afraid of people talking, I said. I'm afraid of lies going unchallenged. Her voice dropped. You don't want to do this. I already am. That evening the messages started. Cousins asking vague questions. Family friends suddenly checking in. One email, anonymous, suggesting I let it go for everyone's sake. Then came the letter. A formal cease and desist. Accusing me of harassment. Warning me to stop contacting extended family. My lawyer laughed when he read it. They're panicking, he said. That means we're close. But panic doesn't stay contained. By the end of the week, Monica posted online a long emotional story about betrayal, about being attacked by someone who never cared about the family. No names, no details, just enough to shape the narrative. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent one email to everyone, a calm request, a date, a location, a family meeting, all welcome, no accusations, no explanations, just the truth waiting. They thought I was bluffing. They didn't realize that by then the evidence was already locked, and the next step would change everything. My lawyer didn't celebrate when I forwarded him Monica's post. He just replied with one sentence. Good. This means they're committing to a version. 2 days later, we met with a forensic handwriting expert. His office was quiet. No drama. No judgment. Just bright lights, scanned documents, and time-stamped comparisons laid out like a puzzle. The will. The earlier drafts. My grandfather's original signature from banking records. He didn't rush. He didn't speculate. He measured pressure patterns, stroke angles, repeated letter formations. After 40 minutes, he looked up. This signature, he said, pointing to the final will, was not written by the same hand. I didn't react. I just nodded. And, he continued, sliding another page forward, the person who signed this tried to imitate the original, but overcorrected. He circled 3 letters. Same hesitation marks. Same lift points. That tells me the forger practiced. I asked one question. Can you tell who did it? He shook his head. Not definitively. But I can tell you this. Whoever forged it had long-term access to the original documents. We both knew what that meant. My lawyer added the journals to the file. Dates. Patterns. Repeated mentions of pressure from my mother. Entries about Monica being entitled and protected. Then came the emails. Old family threads. Bank correspondence. One message buried deep, sent from my sister's account to the estate office, asking for updated copies of the will drafts. That one changed everything, because it placed her inside the process. Not after. During. By the end of the week we had a timeline. The will alteration. The property transfer. The purchase of Monica's house. Exactly 6 weeks later. Dollar for dollar. I sat in my car afterward, hands on the steering wheel staring straight ahead. This was no longer suspicion. This was architecture. That night my aunt called. They know, she said. Your mother is furious. Your sister is scared. Good, I replied. Then they're ready. She hesitated. Are you sure you want to go through with the meeting? Yes, I said. But not to argue. To do what? She asked. To show them they don't control the ending. The invitations went out the next morning. Neutral wording. No accusations. Just one line added at the bottom. Legal counsel will be present. The response was immediate. My mother called first. This is unnecessary, she said. We can handle this privately. We tried that, I replied. Monica texted next. You're embarrassing yourself. I didn't answer. Then my uncle. Then a cousin. Then silence. That silence lasted exactly 12 hours. At 2:14 a.m. my sister sent one final message. You think you're smarter than us. You're not. I looked at it for a long time before turning my phone face down. Because for the first time in my life I didn't need their approval. I had facts. I had proof. And I had the calm that comes when the truth stops being fragile. The family meeting was scheduled for Sunday. They thought it would be a conversation. They didn't know it was going to be a reveal. The night before the meeting I didn't sleep. Not because I was nervous, but because my mind finally had room to think. I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by photocopies of journals, legal briefs, and documents that had once been hidden inside desks and drawers. Proof that had waited years to be seen. I kept coming back to one journal. The oldest one. The pages were thin, The ink faded in places, but my grandfather's handwriting was steady, careful, like he was afraid that if he rushed, someone might erase him. There was one entry I hadn't been able to read all the way through until that night. Ingrid doesn't ask for much. That worries me. Children who learn early not to ask are usually taught that love is conditional. I closed the book and pressed my thumb against the spine. I thought about how many times I'd stayed quiet just to keep the peace. How many apologies I'd offered for things I didn't do. How many years I believed that being patient was the same as being valued. Another entry followed, dated 6 months before his death. If something happens to me, I don't trust her to do what's right. I trust Ingrid to survive it. That line broke me. Not loudly. Not dramatically. I just sat there and let it settle into my chest. For years, I thought being overlooked meant I wasn't important. But reading his words, I finally understood something else. I wasn't ignored because I was weak. I was ignored because I didn't need managing. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. My mother. I let it ring. Then a voicemail. Ingrid, she said, her voice controlled, practiced. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is becoming very ugly. Families don't air things like this. You're hurting people. I deleted it. Not out of anger. Out of clarity. At 1:30 a.m., Monica sent a message. If you go through with this, don't expect to come back from it. I stared at the screen and felt nothing. No fear. No guilt. Just distance. I typed one sentence, then erased it. I didn't know explanations anymore. Instead, I packed a folder. Not thick. Not dramatic. Just enough. The will comparison. The handwriting report. The emails. The journal excerpts. Carefully selected. Not emotional, just factual. I labeled the folder neatly. Estate documentation. Then I set my alarm for 7 a.m. and turned off the light. Lying in the dark, I thought about the version of myself who would have begged for understanding. The 18-year-old who accepted scraps and called them love. The daughter who believed silence was safer than truth. She didn't exist anymore. By morning, the decision felt settled. Not revenge. Resolution. When I woke up, there was a calm in my body I hadn't felt before. Like something heavy had already been set down. I dressed simply. Neutral colors. No jewelry. I wasn't going to the meeting to perform. I was going to finish something. Before leaving, I looked once more at the journals stacked on my desk. These mattered, I said out loud. And so did I. Then I picked up my keys. By noon, my entire family would be sitting in one room. They thought they were there to control the damage. They didn't know the truth was already waiting for them. By the time I arrived, everyone was already there. That wasn't an accident. My mother always liked to arrive early to set the tone, to control the room before anyone else could. The meeting was held at my aunt's house, neutral ground she'd called it, but the moment I stepped inside, I could feel the familiar hierarchy trying to reassert itself. My mother sat at the center of the living room couch. Monica was beside her, legs crossed, phone in hand, visibly bored. 2 uncles stood near the window, whispering. An aunt I barely spoke to nodded politely when she saw me. No one stood up. No one asked how I was. I took the empty chair across from them and set my folder on my lap. My mother smiled tightly. Ingrid, thank you for coming. We just want to clear up some misunderstandings. That word again. Misunderstandings. I nodded once. That's why I'm here. She gestured to the room. We're family. There's no need for lawyers or accusations. Monica finally looked up from her phone. Honestly, Ingrid, this is embarrassing. You're digging up old things for attention. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the folder. The sound of paper shifting made the room quieter than any raised voice could. I didn't come to accuse anyone, I said calmly. I came to present facts. My mother's smile flickered. I placed the first document on the coffee table, 2 wills side by side. This is my grandfather's original will, I said, tapping the left page. And this is the version that was filed. One of my uncles leaned forward. Why do the signatures look different? They are, I replied. A forensic handwriting expert confirmed it. The room shifted. My mother laughed softly. This is ridiculous. Anyone can pay for fake reports. I slid the next page forward. This is the expert certification, I said. And this is his sworn statement. Silence. Then I reached for the journals. I didn't want to read these aloud, I said. But some of you deserve to hear them. I opened to a marked page and read carefully, without emotion. If you are reading this, then the will you were shown was not mine. My aunt gasped. Monica stood up. This is insane. You're twisting his words. I turned the page. I fear my wife will protect Monica at any cost. Ingrid will be told to be patient. She always is. My mother's face went pale. That's enough, she snapped. You're manipulating everyone. I looked at her then. Really looked. No, I said quietly. You did. I placed the final document on the table. An email chain. Dates. Attachments. Edits. Mom, I said, using the word for the first time that day. This is your email forwarding the altered will to the lawyer. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. One uncle stepped back like he'd been burned. Monica's voice dropped. You told me it was legal. My mother finally stood. I did this for my family, she said sharply. I did this to keep things fair. For who? I asked. No one answered. I stood up too. I didn't come here to yell, I said. I came here to tell you what happens next. I closed the folder. The estate is being contested. The documents have been submitted. And after today, I won't be discussing this privately. I turned toward the door. Behind me, the room erupted, questions, accusations, raised voices. But none of it followed me outside. I thought that meeting would end the damage. I was wrong. Because what came next didn't just split the family. It exposed who would survive the truth. And who wouldn't. The fallout didn't happen all at once. It started quietly in pieces. The morning after the meeting, my phone was full of missed calls. Not from my parents, but from relatives who had never checked on me before. Aunts asking for clarification. Uncles wanting to stay neutral. People who suddenly remembered I existed now that the truth had been spoken out loud. I didn't return any of them. By noon my lawyer called. They've retained counsel, he said. Your mother and sister. Separately. That told me everything I needed to know. Monica wasn't standing with our parents anymore. She was protecting herself. The formal lawsuit was filed 3 days later, contesting the will, alleging forgery, naming my mother as the primary actor and Monica as a beneficiary who had knowledge of the fraud. Seeing it in writing was surreal. For most of my life I'd been the quiet one, the one told not to make waves, the one who absorbed discomfort so others wouldn't have to feel it. Now my name was printed at the top of a legal document that threatened everything my family had built their image on. Depositions began within weeks. My mother went first. I wasn't in the room, but I read the transcript later. Page after page of careful answers. Selective memory. Phrases like, I don't recall. And that wasn't my understanding at the time. Then came the emails. The handwriting report. The journals. Her story started to bend. Monica's deposition was worse. She cried, according to my lawyer. Said she trusted our parents. Said she never asked questions. Said she thought the money was a gift. But then they showed her the house closing documents. The dates. The exact amount down to the dollar matching the inheritance. After that she stopped crying. Outside the legal process, the family began to fracture. My parents' friends stopped inviting them to events. Church acquaintances grew distant. People don't like being close to scandal, especially when it smells like greed. Monica's engagement quietly dissolved. No announcement. No explanation. Just deleted photos and a ring that disappeared from her finger. I didn't celebrate any of it. I felt tired. I moved out of my small apartment and into a quieter place closer to work. I stopped checking social media. I let my lawyer handle communication. I focused on sleeping through the night for the first time in months. One afternoon my aunt, the one who hosted the meeting, called me. I should have spoken up years ago, she said. I'm sorry. I thanked her. And meant it. But apologies don't rewrite history. They just acknowledge it. The case drew attention I hadn't expected. Nothing public yet, but whispers travel fast in certain circles. Especially when lawyers start asking questions about forged documents and altered estates. My mother tried to call me once. I didn't answer. She sent a text instead. I did what I thought was best for the family. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. Because what she meant was, I did what was best for the version of the family where I stayed in control. Weeks turned into months. Motions were filed. Evidence stacked up. The pressure became constant. Not loud but heavy. Like living under a ceiling you know is cracking, waiting to see who it falls on. And through it all I stayed quiet. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need to explain myself anymore. The truth was doing the talking. As the court date approached, everyone assumed the verdict would be the end. But the judge's ruling wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part came after, when I had to decide what justice actually meant to me. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grand marble halls. No dramatic music. Just beige walls, wooden benches, and the quiet weight of everything that had led us here. I sat behind my attorney, hands folded, spine straight. I had learned over the years that stillness made people uncomfortable, especially when they expected emotion. My mother sat across the aisle. She didn't look at me. Monica did once. Just for a second. Her face was pale, unreadable. Not angry. Not sad. Just empty. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Everyone sat. And then it began. The ruling wasn't theatrical. It was precise. The judge walked through the facts slowly, methodically. Dates. Amounts. Signatures. Expert testimony. The handwriting analysis. The journals. The email correspondence recovered from old servers. Each piece stacked neatly on the record. Forgery. Intent. Beneficiary knowledge. Breach of fiduciary duty. When the judge said the words, "The will presented by the defendants is hereby declared invalid," my breath caught, not because I was shocked, but because something inside me finally loosened. The estate was reinstated to my grandmother's original, legally executed will. My name. As sole beneficiary. The court ordered restitution. The funds could not be recovered in full. The house had depreciated, loans had been taken, money spent. But the judgment required repayment through asset liquidation. In plain terms, they would pay for what they did. My mother closed her eyes. Monica whispered something to her lawyer. I didn't react. The judge continued. There were penalties, legal fees, formal findings of misconduct, language that would follow them far longer than any rumor ever could. Then the gavel came down. It was over. Or so everyone thought. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited. Not many, but enough. Cameras lifted. Questions fired. I didn't stop. My lawyer answered on my behalf. Clear. Minimal. Controlled. This case was never about revenge, he said. It was about restoring what was taken. That was true. What surprised me was how little satisfaction I felt. I had imagined this moment for years, the justice, the validation, the public acknowledgement that I wasn't crazy, selfish, or ungrateful. But standing there, all I felt was distance. As if the girl who needed this outcome had already grown into someone else. My mother approached me in the hallway. Ingrid, she said quietly. I turned. For the first time I saw something crack, not guilt, not remorse, but fear. The fear of being seen clearly. I never meant to hurt you, she said. I held her gaze. I know, I replied. You just didn't think about me at all. There was nothing more to say. Monica didn't speak to me. She walked past like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. By the time I got home, the adrenaline was gone. The house was quiet. No calls. No messages. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the weight of finality. I poured a glass of water and sat at the table. I thought about my grandmother. Her voice. Her hands. The way she used to look at me like I mattered, even when no one else did. The court gave me back what was taken. But it didn't give me back the years. And that was okay. Because justice isn't about erasing the past. It's about refusing to let it keep happening. Winning the case didn't bring peace the way I expected. That came later, during a conversation I never thought I'd have. And a decision I made that changed how my family would exist in my life forever. I didn't feel peace right away. That surprised me. Everyone assumes justice brings closure. Like a switch flips and suddenly everything hurts less. But the truth is, the day after the ruling felt painfully ordinary. I woke up, made coffee, checked my phone. No messages from my mother. None from Monica. And for the first time in my life, that silence didn't feel like rejection. Felt like space. A week later, my mother asked to meet. Just her. No lawyers. No apologies prepared in advance. We sat in a quiet cafe halfway between our houses, neutral ground. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. The confidence she used to wear like armor was gone. I don't expect forgiveness, she said. I just need to understand why you did this. I took a breath. I didn't do this to you, I said calmly. I did it for myself. She nodded slowly. I was angry at my mother, she admitted. She favored you. She always did. And when she left you that money, it felt like she was judging me. Like she was saying I failed. I didn't argue, because that part was true. But instead of dealing with that, I said, you decided I should pay for it. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't think you'd ever find out. I leaned back. That's the part that hurts the most. We didn't hug. We didn't reconcile. We didn't make promises. And strangely, that felt honest. Monica filed for divorce 3 months later. The house, the one bought with my grandmother's money, was sold as part of the restitution. She moved into a small apartment across town. I heard through relatives that she was starting over. I wished her no harm. But I didn't reach out. Because healing doesn't mean reopening doors that taught you how to bleed. I used part of the restored inheritance to pay off my debts. Another portion went into long-term savings, something my grandmother always talked about but never had herself. And the rest? I donated it. A scholarship fund. Quietly. In her name. For students who were overlooked. For kids who carried responsibility too early. For the ones who were told to be grateful for scraps. That part felt right. I also started therapy. Not because I was broken, but because I was tired of carrying things that weren't mine. I learned something important there. Neglect leaves marks just as deep as abuse. Sometimes deeper. Because it teaches you that pain doesn't count unless someone else acknowledges it. I stopped chasing acknowledgement. I built a life that didn't require permission. New routines. New friendships. Chosen family. People who show up. People who listen. People who don't confuse love with control. And every once in a while, when the house is quiet, I think about my grandmother. Not about the money, but about the moment she decided I was worth protecting, even when no one else did. That belief changed everything. If you're watching this and wondering whether choosing yourself makes you cruel, let me tell you what I learned the hard way. Silence isn't peace. Truth isn't betrayal. And family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who refuses to erase you. I didn't lose my family. I found myself. If you've ever had to walk away to survive, you're not heartless. You're brave. And you're not alone.